What's up, brother? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome to another conversation on the Mike Muse Show. This show is a special one for me for so many different reasons. One, these two experts are my homies. This is my crew, like legitimately my freshman roommate, who is now the expert on Section 230. And then the second gentleman is my brother. Like literally met him on the campus at University of Michigan when he was damn near a freshman. So I believe I'm a year older, but yeah, was damn near when he was a freshman. So everything is centered around freshman year in Michigan, which is why I specifically wore this Michigan shirt today, because I'm just so proud, one, to be a Michigan man, but then two, I'm just so proud of both of these experts, of who they are. We've been dealing a lot this week with everything that's been happening around Facebook. In the conversation, the testimony of the Facebook whistleblower. And it was extremely explosive, it was extremely fair, and it was extremely open to more dialogue that could be of help to push this through. And I want to continue to do a deep dive because you guys have been hitting me up in the DMs and really letting me know you want more, or how much some of the conversation I've been having this week has really helped you guys out. And so I just wanted to bring two people who I believe are just experts in this field. One is a Section 230 expert, so we're going to talk about that. And then the second one is just an AI big data expert. Why? This guy, my brother, is a genius. Literally, he's one of the smartest guys on campus. I know he's going to push back on me when I get the chance to turn the microphone over to him, but while I have the microphone, pure genius. He broke records of like being one of the youngest to get into Harvard Business School after only like working in industry, I think for a year or something crazy. Then he came out to work for incredible other corporation, but the most importantly now is that he has his own company dealing with big data and AI called Petrum Analytics. He is the CEO and founder, Mr. Jibreel Lockhart. What's happening, Jibreel?
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me, man. Listen, you're too kind. And honestly, everybody out there, Mike has been a superstar ever since I met him when I was a freshman on campus at Michigan. So I look at Mike like he's a big brother. Thanks for having me on the show.
Man, I'm just super excited, Jibreel. Thank you so much, man. Like, you are a fam. I enjoy all of our get-togethers, you know, all of our vacation spots in the summer, all the things that we do, brother. I love you. I'm so proud of you. But let's just get to it. We have a lot to cover here today. Sure. AI, machine learning, big data. I've been talking about, Jibreel, from the most basic elements and perspectives in the sense of what happens is this AI that we all use, we all do on a daily basis. Audience, I've been talking to you all week about essentially if you have Netflix, if you watch a film on Netflix, Netflix is just going to recommend you other titles and films that are very similar to that. And what it is it's drawing on your behavior patterns, right? And so what you're liking, the machine is recognizing. So it's essentially learning on the data, right, that you are actually inputting to output your film titles. And so at its core, there are data sets that need to happen in order for the machine to learn off, in order to create the algorithm that is the output for you. So Jibreel, that's my extent. I'm gonna stop there and let you go a little bit further and just talk to us about that process, about the data and the machine and how it's learning. If you could. Ladies and gentlemen, Jibreel, his background is in engineering and computer science and is all these things.
Yes. So you know, I'll take it from the perspective of actually when I started at Michigan, how I started to actually come into some awareness of how AI and machine learning and some of these advanced algorithms were going to, you know, really change the world in general. And it was sitting in a EECS 100 class, and DoubleClick was just starting. It was like maybe 3 or 4 years.
EECS is electrical engineering computer science.
That's right. That's right. So I was sitting in an electrical engineering course, and they were recruiting for DoubleClick. They were talking about how advertising online is really going to evolve into something that's much more personalized. And hearing the story, I was like, of course, that why would you want to have a generic ad show to you or generic videos coming up on, your site, if there was a possibility of having something that actually was going to be closer to something that you liked, something that was relevant. And this aspect of relevance and being able to create algorithms that make something relevant to you based on what your behavior is really what, like, the basis of a lot of this debate about AI comes back to trying to find ways to improve a customer experience, right? Or to improve the speed at which people can actually interact or engage with, a particular, media site or a particular website. So at the basis of it, it starts with customer behavior, learning from that, finding ways to, really assimilate other people that behave the same way this person behaves, have a similar profile, similar background. Let's show them something that other people in their cohort typically click on, something that they typically like, right? So it seems very, very, benevolent in its nature. But when you start to really kind of, go from that kind of recommendation engine over into where we are now with a social media culture where so much of the news that people see and the kind of stories that they hear are going through this filter. And the filter is finding stories that people like you have clicked on, people like you have saved, people like you have liked. And unfortunately, that leads to some pretty concerning outcomes in terms of how people engage and learn about things like the news, things like vaccines, things like Afghanistan, things like just politics in general. So that leads to some unexpected consequences when you have that kind of algorithmic content strategy. Now focusing on what type of news people get to watch or listen to.
I love how you use the word benevolence. So I'm gonna use this word. I'm gonna keep going with the benevolent theme, right? Because I do want you to peel back a little bit further, just the fundamentals of the AI and big data machine. But since we're here for right now, it is a benevolent, and so as people are clicking, so is it the responsibility then of Facebook? So should the charge of consequence be placed on Facebook, or should the charge of consequence be put on the user that is actually clicking on these sites and saving, as you said, in order for the algorithm to continuously feed these outputs?
Yeah, the reality is that it has to be both, right? And so in the Section 230 and what we've been kind of talking about, you've been talking about on the show, is a part of the issue in terms of, well, how much responsibility should these platforms have to police themselves, to set more rigorous guidelines, and to have more transparency, right? Which are two related issues but separate. One being, hey, do you have a policy that states clearly what's allowed and not allowed on your platform? And the other is just being transparent about what is being used to prioritize particular news stories, or what's being prioritized in your feed, and what's the objective of it, right? And so I think this question of whose responsibility is it to kind of manage and think about the implications of the algorithm, it's absolutely the platform's responsibility, but it's also the user's responsibility to understand that these platforms are designed to generate profits for their shareholders. And their shareholders want them to generate more advertising revenue, which comes from getting more users to spend more minutes and hours on their platforms. And the way they do that is by finding ways that trigger, your reptile brain to click again. It triggers and trains your mind to want to click again, because you're getting a dopamine hit is something that either is very engaging because it's something that you like, or it's potentially provocative and makes you want to engage or comment because it's it's just like clickbait, right? So we have to be cognizant of the intentions of the companies that we are entrusting our attention to, and learn how to be even more critical observers and consumers of media, because these media platforms don't have the same structure, editorial structure, and kind of controls that perhaps at a traditional newspaper that we've come to trust for our news source that they had, right? They're the New York Times or the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. They have an editorial angle, and that you kind of know their bias. Versus when you log onto your social media platform, you assume that there is some objectivity and that you're getting a broad, mix of news from different sources because it's coming from different people. But the reality is it's really designed in order to just engage you as long as possible and to keep
you. So let's put a pin in there right there. So in the audience, what he was saying was, the idea is that these platforms, they have community guidelines typically, and they usually have these departments that are there to monitor, to make sure there is no child pornography. It's very hate speech, incite violence, making the community, the users, feel unsafe. And so they normally kick them out. What Frances was alluding to was that the machines are actually driving that. So looking for the keywords, where she was saying it's not driven by the human capital in terms of humans actually facilitating it. But then she was getting to the aspect of the scale and the cost of having all those humans doing all of that. But as a result of us leaning in on the technology machines to do it, they miss things. It makes it a little bit more complicated. And Jibreel, this is why I love everything you just said, because audience, what Jibreel just laid out is how nuanced this conversation is, right? It just isn't this idea. It's not black and white, right? Like as Jibreel said, it falls on both the user and the platform's responsibility. Look at it from the perspective of the platform, Section 230, all kind of good stuff, as being the platforms are the paperboy, and then the publishers are like the Washington Post or New York Times. And so are you mad at the Washington Post or New York Times? Do you want to sue them? Or do you want to sue the paper boy who's just responsible for bringing you the Washington Post and New York Times? But Jibreel, is what you're getting at, because there's this theory out there, and I know you're about to go, there's this theory out there of that, it's almost, people just think that it's the Facebook or the platform, right? Audience, I'm going to interchange Facebook and platform. So it is the platform, i.e. Facebook, and then the user. I would say that it's Facebook, the user, and advertisers. And so talk to us about that Trinity as it relates to how Facebook could prioritize the algorithms, right? To capture everything you said, these feelings, in order to make sure the advertising dollar is there so that users can use this platform for free.
Sure. So let's talk about and break down this paperboy metaphor. So if you think of the New York Times as the producer of the point of view, right? They should be free to have a point of view and share an editorial piece of content. And the paperboy is just delivering it to you. There's the platform that you get that content through. The role that Facebook and other social media platforms play, though, is that they're also the editor that gets to decide what goes on the front page, what goes above the fold, what goes below the fold. And for those in media that understand that from even a website development perspective, when you control where the story goes, you bury a positive story on the back page, right, that nobody flips to, that everybody kind of throws away, you're effectively changing the balance of like who the content creator is and who has a particular point of view that you want to share, because you're prioritizing a particular point of view for a particular cohort of people. And what the testimony is in terms of bringing it back to advertisers is, does the platform know that they are purposely taking advantage or influencing very sensitive topics in just the American culture by overweighting the algorithm to focus purely on attention and dollars and cents, versus having some controls that would prohibit them in certain categories from doubling down on things that they have been brought to their attention as having a negative impact or externality. So I think advertisers, in which I am a part of the ecosystem, working with companies every single day to help them optimize their marketing spend on these platforms, the advertisers are responsible to speak up and say, hey, we do need you to have certain standards. Many companies over the past, just in the past 2 years with the BLM movement, have been vocal about supporting companies or pulling back advertising dollars from companies who don't have a public and very serious posture about diversity. And it's a similar thing that will happen here. I strongly believe that business leaders that I talk to are concerned about their teenage daughters, their kids that are growing up, coming into this social media environment and not having companies that are responsible and have leadership that is going to be very, very thoughtful and proactive about the kind of editorial controls that newspapers, for example, have had for many years. I think we're going to have to evolve our governance of these companies in order to kind of put some of those controls in place. And I think it's just normal technology to evolve that way.
So we can get into the weeds of that just a little bit. Because what I want to pull out from there is the idea of weighted and weighted posts or weighted, because this idea of should it be sequential in the timeline, meaning if I post on Monday, you see it on Monday. But then sometimes, audience, as you know, you may see a post from last Thursday
yeah.
on the following Saturday, right?
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen,
Yeah.
right? And so should we do sequential or should we do, base recommendation based?
Yeah.
So with that, if you can nerd out for me just a little bit, Jibreel, so how does that work algorithmically from a computer science perspective, from a data input perspective on the weight? Because that's really what we're getting to is the responsibility of Facebook then, right? Like we don't know, and audience, Jibreel doesn't know the secrets. None of us know the secret sauce of Facebook's algorithm. Only Zuckerberg and maybe two other people know the secret sauce. But from a generality perspective, right? Can you talk to us about how that data looks like? If you don't mind. And audience, Jibreel is all on the spot. Like he had no idea I'm asking him. I didn't know the fuck I was gonna be asking him. And here we are. But I know he can handle it.
So I would say from a computer science perspective, I think about it from a, maybe we use a engineering kind of framework of imagine that you have, a three-dimensional space, X, Y, and Z axis, right? And you can choose a variable you can choose a variable for each dimension. And you can dial up or down, like how, far left or right you want to go on the X, Y axis, how, high up or down you want to go on the Y axis, and how, far back or forth you want to go on the Z axis. Every post that someone makes has a particular score when it comes to the emotional, emotional category that it strikes, right? Is this happy? Is this sad? Is this, evoking some other emotion? But it also has a score in terms of the kind of people that are clicking on that ad. So the profile of the people, are they younger? Are they older? Is this like a millennial crowd? Is this a millennial crowd that leans more African-American? Is it a millennial crowd that leans more Hispanic? Those demographic profiles are another dimension, right? So you have emotion on one end, you have a dimension of, what the demographic profile of the, most common, viewers for that particular piece of content are. So that's on your X and Y axis. Then on the Z axis, you have this other score around engagement, right? And so emotion, demographic profile, engagement level, and what you imagine, and this is just generically, if you were designing a social media platform, things that you would consider. Not saying this is exactly how the platforms work, but you can imagine that if you're trying to decide what piece of content to show, now I have 3 scores, and now I have you, right? So I say, okay, I have Mike. What do I want to show to Mike? Well, I want to think about what kind of mood do I think he's in right now? What kind of mood do I want to invoke in him? And what kind of mood tends to get the best response, right? Then I want to say, okay, from a demographic perspective, what are people like him that are in the same friend circle? Because we know his friends. We know, who he typically interacts with in his close friend network. We also know a broader network of people that he reaches out to from time to time. So we can use that demographic profile to really kind of curate, here are people, obviously people that he's liked before in the past, that we want to curate here. And then the engagement level. If there's posts that are getting a lot of comments, a lot of likes in your close friend circle or in your expanded group or in these groups that you associate with periodically, then they say that's likely to get higher engagement from Mike. So we should prioritize all 3 of those things in those dimensions and come up with algorithms that keep them going, right? On an emotional curve, on a social curve, and then on an engagement curve that gets at the end of the day, maximizes the number of views and clicks for the advertisers, right? So that's how it all ties together, is having those dimensions, understanding that it's no one formula, right? It's not like one thing. Like this is a very simplified way of thinking about it. But for organizations like any social media platform, you win by keeping people's attention and by understanding and decoding how we think, right? And particularly our emotional code, what I like to call, from a advertising perspective, like everybody has a particular emotional DNA, and certain things that really appeal to, who they are, what kind of ambitions and goals they have, as well as what kind of insecurities and fears they have. And so when we're doing analytics working with brands, we're trying to understand that as well. And we're trying to help them create content.
Wait, stop. Before you get to the brands, that's a whole, because that is almost on my XYZ axis, the Trinity when it comes to the Facebook, the user, and then the advertiser or the brand. Right. audience, that breakdown was amazing. I don't know if you saw it, but I pulled out my pen and I started taking notes. And I was thinking to myself, how am I this blessed to have friends this freaking smart? Jibreel, that was a genius. He literally gave a on-the-spot impromptu lecture. He had no idea what I was going to ask him. But I just want to make sure, Jibreel, that the audience hasn't gotten lost yet. So audience, I just want to just reset really quickly. The reason why I took notes is, so Jibreel explained it from an X, Y, and Z axis. So the X meaning emotion, the Y being demographic, and then the Z being engagement. And so audience, when you think about that, this is why science and technology is so beautiful and so miraculous when you think about it. All that computation that he just talked about in terms of where it took Jibreel about 5 minutes to explain all that computation, that data that's being pulled together happens in 0.000000000000001 seconds. And not just for me and Jibreel or for you, audience, but for Facebook's 2.8 billion users in over 130 countries. All that he just said happens that quickly, that fast, at the same time with all those people. That is what we talk about when we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And the beauty of it, right? And just as Jibreel started off earlier, it was the benevolence of the AI machine learning, right? AI can be for good. I always advocate, and Jibreel and I have a lot of offline conversations about AI for good, right? And AI can be used for bad. That's when all these biases are inputted and all these other things, and when the dollar is associated. So Jibreel, you actually made me think about something completely different, which I wasn't even thinking about, right? Was how then these platforms are able to move that scale, right? Move that X and Y and Z axis accordingly, right? So in essence, then Jibreel, we think we're in control if you go by just the purity of algorithmic and recommendations, right? I like this, so then Mike will like 5 other things, but there's so many other things that have been in control from asking me to keep liking that. At what percentage? And this is a guesstimate, audience. I'll be very clear. Do not hold Jibreel to this. This is not a factual statement because he doesn't know and I don't know. What percentage then is Facebook controlling, the X, Y, and Z versus our natural selection? So is it 50-50? Do you think Facebook is controlling the dials like 60% and we're in control 40 based upon the likes? Or is that a false narrative that I'm comparing, right? False equivalencies. And it's fair if it's a false equivalency. You can say that too. I can be wrong.
I would say that if you think about this XYZ paradigm, there are the thing to consider about like who's controlling what what that midpoint is, right? Within that, in terms of across the entire population, what is the particular coordinates of a political viewpoint that's being, sent to you in your feed. I would say the bigger influence of that, where things are kind of the normal is set, is certainly kind of a broader media story, right? So what is the broader media outside of just social media talking about and promoting? But I think that so much of our dialogue and that set point on issues is being influenced by big money in politics and by much larger organizations that have much larger dollars to promote not just direct paid content, but indirect sponsored content for their viewpoints. And so what I think is missing in some of these debates is it assumes that there's just the user, the government, and user and advertisers and the social media platforms and maybe the government at a different level. Well, the reality is that the advertisers, there's another component of influence that larger organizations and political organizations in particular have by enrolling people to really promote a particular agenda on the platform. And so it would be akin to having someone has a very strong political motivation to move the conversation in this direction on the x-axis, right? Move it to the right. Well, how do you do that if Facebook controls it? Well, the reality is Facebook is just looking for ad dollars and looking for engagement. And so what you do is you get people to retweet. You hire agents. There's companies that will create bots that will just push a particular agenda on a conversation and drive the engagement level up, right? That changes where the set point is and what you think you're fighting, which is the platform. The platform is just optimizing for engagement and genuinely doesn't know the actual downstream impacts of how it's moved the conversation to the left.
That's such a So my question was a good question at the end of the day, because what we
right? So how much does it control, right? I was like, I don't know. I think it's more complicated than that.
Because I was looking at it, and shame on me, audience. As you know, I never look at things from a very binary perspective, and then here I go asking a very basic binary question, right? Mm-hmm. To that the answer clearly isn't binary. It's so nuanced, and I use nuance all the time, right? And so, yes, you have the X, Y, and Z algorithm. Yes, there could be some controls of what you prioritize in that moment. But at the same time, there's so many other outside influences, which Jibreel just mentioned, such as the advertisers, the influencers, the paid advertisement, right, to get you to stroke and engage in this particular doctrine, ideology, product, whatever thing it may be. I was thinking, Jibreel, just for examples perspective, audience, it kind of was thinking about like to use like a flash mob, right? How like one person starts dancing, then two, and then 5, and then 10, and next you know you're surrounded in park with 1,000 people just dancing. Right?
What if you could create a holographic image of thousands of people dancing? That wasn't actual real people, but it made it seem like there were 1,000 people dancing around you. So you would start dancing. Well, that's what's happening in social media right now.
That's it.
1,000 holograms that are promoting a particular viewpoint. And then because of the echo chamber of your feed, other people are seeing those same holograms. So they're dancing. So before you know it, it feels and genuinely it's a flash mob. But how did it start, right? What was it really organic? Well, in 100 years ago, that flash mob, of course, was organic because the people had to come out of their homes, come to the town square, get excited about an issue, and rally around a particular leader who had a viewpoint that they were physically seeing them like advocate for or debate, right? Now we're in a virtual world. We don't know who's real and who's not. And so you go back to the new knowledge report that was done a few years ago, looking at the influence of other, foreign parties on our elections. It was very clear that they decided that there are people in California, we're going to focus on them and try to get them not to vote. Let's disenfranchise Texans who are very, for some would say good reasons, concerned about, U.S. government, oversight and overreach, and concerned about states' rights. So they're saying, hey, let's not vote. They're being actually influenced by, I would call them the holograms that are saying, hey, this is a real important issue. Let's just stay out of this election. Well, that influenced Michigan, several years ago, and influenced a lot of people across the country and had a huge impact on, the direction of the country.
Jibreel, that is our time. I promise I will have you out of here. Audience, I truly believe in leaving you on a cliffhanger. That means Jibreel has to come back again to break this down even more. I think that's good enough information now, audience, for you to pause, to reflect, to rewind all the things that Jibreel just said right now and take some notes, because he just gave a master class in 25 minutes on what AI is. But he really, Jibreel, what you did was, and that's why I knew you were just amazing and perfect, was highlighted just how nuanced this conversation is. And you really have helped me illuminate of how binary we have made this debate, how binary we have made this conversation. And there's so much to it, and so many other forces are out there that it's just not Zuckerberg, right? And this isn't me giving him cover, but there's just so many other forces at play surrounding all of this. And I think, Jibreel, we're just in a space where technology is just growing so fast. We don't even, and I think we're learning the power of it as we go and build. And what's really interesting, Jibreel, is we're also too learning the different use cases of it almost constantly, right? When you have 2.89 billion people playing with your products on a daily basis, there's going to be new ways to use it, good or bad, right? And so it's like, how do you create enough regulations? And then if you should, and that's a whole nother conversation down the road, because when you tweak one, try and do good, you could actually go bad 2 steps back. So Jibreel Lockhart, my friend, my brother, thank you for being great and being a genius. And thank you for coming on the show and helping us break that down today, my brother.
You're too kind. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate having you. Keep doing what you're doing, man. We love it.
All right, man. Love you. Hold on real quick, bro. Love you, man. Audience, stay right there. We'll be right back on the other side with Jeff Kosseff. I mean, you thought this was good. Wait until you hear Jeff break down Section 230. And don't worry, I'm going to make it as fun and as cool, just as Jibreel and I, this conversation had right now. So if you've ever been afraid of Section 230, don't be afraid. Now it's time to tune in, get some coffee, a snack, a drink, refresh your pit. We'll be right back.